Welcome to The Great Exchange, a podcast about examining the lies that we believe and exchanging them for God's truth. I'm your host, Brady Cohn, and joining us today is a guest co-host, Tyler Zock. Tyler, how are you doing today?
Great.
Good. And you are joining us from your office in Omaha, Nebraska. So it's great that we have this technology that can allow us to do this long distance. I've known you for, about 15 years now. We were both on staff with Crew together, and then we kind of went separate ways. And you've been a pastor and a church planter, and now God's transitioning you to another full-time ministry that you have. And I'm really excited to talk about it today because it's something a little bit different than we normally talk about on this podcast. Normally, people here are used to talking about gender, sexuality, marriage, parenting. But today we are talking about the Enneagram, which has become a little bit controversial in today's Christian world. But I really think it plays into and affects parenting and marriage and relationships and gender and sexuality, and can be used as a wonderful tool to help us grow in those areas. And you are the Enneagram expert. You have a whole ministry talking about Enneagram. You've written books on it. So why don't you just start by sharing with us your ministry and how that has come about?
Yeah, well, I've always loved writing, and I've always loved personality assessments and just understanding how God is wired us very uniquely. And I found the Enneagram to be the most profound, deep tool, most life-changing tool of them all. If you look at Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finders, there's all kinds of different tools. And this one is unique in the fact that it's not just based on behavior, but it's motivation-based. It's a motivation-based personality framework oriented around 9 types. And I don't believe that God just created 9 types, but it's 9 ways of categorizing people based on their core fears, lies they believe, idols they have, and it's a pretty good system. And so I tell people the 9 types is kind of like having the primary colors on the color wheel. And there's not just 9 types, not just 9 boxes you fit in. But if you start, mixing colors together, you get an infinite amount of hues and beautiful shades, just like the paint swatches at Home Depot. So that's kind of how I come at the Enneagram. And really, it's also a map that helps chart a growth path. So it doesn't just tell you, like, here's your 5 strengths, like the Strengths Finder, but it also says, hey, when you are healthy, you actually move and take on some of the characteristics of this other personality type. Or if you're stressed, you will actually slide in this direction. So it's a great visual growth path for people. The thing I always mention when talking with Christians is, that John Calvin said that we need 2 things in order to grow. We need an awareness of God, and we need an awareness of self, that both are required. And as you know, there's a lot of Christians, really great Christians who read their Bibles, who have a lot of Bible knowledge and a lot of awareness of God, but very little self-awareness. And
absolutely.
The Enneagram is such a helpful diagnostic tool to help us understand ourselves better. Because if we don't understand ourselves better, if we have no awareness, then we won't know what to change. We won't know what needs growing. And so I've just found a number of benefits from the Enneagram. We'll get to the parts that are a little more controversial and those type of things, but I think it's helpful to start with, why are we even using this tool in the first place?
Yeah, build a foundation of how it can be used for gospel growth in our lives and in our relationships.
Yeah. I heard one pastor call the Enneagram sniper sanctification, meaning that it helps put the crosshairs on certain aspects of your life that you hadn't even thought of before.
Oh, I like that.
I can read my Bible, and I can, even in reading my Bible, I can suppress the truth about what I'm reading, about who I am. But the Enneagram says, here are some things you need to pay attention to. I always say the Enneagram is not about absolutes, but about probabilities, because we can't let anything like the Enneagram or any other tool tell us our identity. Like our identity comes from God. And so, there's no such thing as you are a type 9. That is your identity. But if you take an assessment or a test and it says, hey, the results are showing that type 9 is really high on the results, then there's a high probability that there's a number of things in the type 9 that you may struggle with. It's not absolutely that all those things are not absolutely true of you. It's not putting you in a box, but it's saying, hey, pay attention to these probabilities. There's a high chance that you're going to struggle with procrastination, for example, for a type 9. There's going to be a high chance that you're going to be conflict avoidant and are going to be a peace faker rather than a peacemaker. So you have to pay attention to those kinds of things. So again, we're thinking in terms of probabilities, not absolutes. And that's how it can be helpful in sniper sanctification, of just bringing these issues that you maybe hadn't even thought of before. Like for me, it was caring too much about my image, bending the truth.
What type are you?
Type 3.
Oh, very good.
So they're the achiever. And I always knew I was an achiever, that I like to work a lot and work hard and, be an overachiever at times. But the Enneagram really helped me to see how much I cared about my image, how much I have an Instagram filter for life and want myself to present myself in the best possible light at all times, which causes me to bend the truth at times to look good or to not look bad. And it's also helped me to see my conflict triggers of why I blow up at my kids, why I get frustrated with my coworkers, because a lot of it comes down to, for type 3s, is we don't want to be interrupted. We want efficiency. We want to get things done. We want to be amazing producers. And when people interrupt us during the day, that's what causes stress. It causes conflict because it gets in the way of blocking our goals and blocking the path to our goals and efficiency. So all that to say, it's really helped me on the journey to sanctification.
Wow. So that's great to hear it being used in such a gospel-centered way that gave you awareness that really reveals not only your sin, but just your tendencies that could lead to sin. I have a little bit of a similar path where I'm a type 2, and so that's the helper. And when I first read about the Enneagram and I did the test, it's like, okay, am I type 2? What does that mean? I started reading a book. And the helper, our downfall when we're unhealthy is that we expect everyone else to know our needs. And you could probably speak into that a lot. But when I read that, it's like, oh my gosh, I get so frustrated with people because I have unhealthy expectations because I know what their needs are. Sometimes I know what their needs are and I fulfill them and I fix them before they even know what they are. And so it's like I'm working behind the scenes to fix everyone's problems and help them in all the ways I know that they need help. But then I make the assumption that they should be doing the same for me. It's like, well, why don't they know my needs without me communicating it? Because I know their needs without them communicating it. And I realized how much that had led to resentfulness of people, especially as I had worked through, sexual identity and this concept of masculinity and feeling like I am in the world of men and as a boy having felt excluded by the world of men. I realized that with my Enneagram type that I had a natural tendency to feel excluded by men and unloved by men because they didn't maybe have the same abilities to see my needs the way that I saw theirs. And so that was a light bulb moment in my walk with God and in my sanctification where I realized I was putting unrealistic expectations on people. And I still now I'm able to filter relationships through that. And sometimes if I'm getting frustrated by someone, it's like, okay, is that a healthy expectation or is my unhealthy 2 coming out and I'm having unhealthy expectations on them and I need to readjust my thinking and the lens through which I am viewing them through.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the just the gender piece, because that is something that God has really taught me using the Enneagram, is to get beyond some of the boxes of masculinity and femininity that our culture has constructed. There's just a general box that we say, hey, these are
Yes.
masculine. This is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to be a woman. And we have these boxes, and the Enneagram has kind of like dissolved those boxes for me, and helped me to see things differently. And so, for example, it's really hard to be a female 8 in the church. Because female 8s are very assertive, they're very direct. They have these masculine, or what's known as masculine qualities, and oftentimes are judged for having a voice, for speaking up, for being assertive. So it's really, really hard to be a female 8. It's really hard to be a male 4. Because 4s tend to be more artists, creative. A lot of them are therapists, because they're really good at navigating emotions and dark emotions and heart and suffering. And they tend to be the biggest feelers on the Enneagram. And so just because they're more sensitive by nature, oftentimes they won't be looked at as a quote unquote man or masculine man in the church.
Absolutely.
And you said you were a type 2, and type 2 men also have a hard time in the church because they're so wired for relationships. 2s are the most people on the Enneagram. They have a deep desire for emotional connection with other human beings and to relate to people on a deep level in that way. And so oftentimes if you get into a men's ministry where it's all, playing sports and doing things like that don't create space for like people for you to connect with other men on a deep emotional level and experience friendship and all that, like you're going to feel left out. You're going to feel marginalized.
Absolutely.
In a church.
And then for someone who is already wrestling through maybe sexual identity, gender identity, or just wanting a place to belong, like we all need a place to belong, and we can mistakenly exclude so many people in the church because they don't fit a certain mold of what we consider to be a man or a woman, and we don't give space for them to have a feeling of belonging and connection that really speaks to their heart and connects with them.
Exactly. And one more thing that I'll say is it's really helped my marriage out. I really misread my wife for so many years. We battled infertility early on in marriage, and as you know, couples grieve differently.
Yes.
And a big part of the problem is we just misread each other. As a 3s are good at giving hope and inspiring people not to get stuck, but to move towards goals, move towards the future, to have a bright outlook on the future. And that's what I was trying to do. That's right. That's the way I was trying to help her in infertility, was continuing to look to the future, to say, hey, God's going to do this. God's going to show up. I know he is. And she's a type 6, and type 6s are the exact opposite. They think of all the worst case scenarios. They're good with discernment. They're realists. And I saw her as a pessimist, the way that she was grieving. And I had a community around me before I even knew the Enneagram. I had a community around me showing me that Lindsay was the one who was actually grieving more like David in the Psalms, of crying, of pouring your anxiety and your heart out to the Lord, while I was just being a immature 3. I was just hope, stuffing the problems under the rug, just saying,
and not
hey,
dealing
God's
with
going to show
reality.
up and do it. Yeah, just spiritual bypassing. And now that I look back in that season, and if I would have known the Enneagram in that season, it would have been helpful. I would have seen Lindsay not as a pessimist, but as a realist, as someone who was more like David. I would have seen her as a protector, not a pessimist. Just seeing that when she brings up her doubts and concerns to me, it's not because she's trying to complain or trying to be a Debbie Downer, but she's just trying to protect me and protect our family.
Wow.
And I didn't see that was where that was coming from in her heart. And so it just helped me to see her, in high definition, helped me to see her personality and her motivations in higher definition. And it's been,
I remember
really
one
helpful.
time in one of our crew staff meetings, that we had together, you were talking about how you're very future oriented. And I think this is before you even knew the Enneagram, but you kind of called out some greatness in Lindsay and talked about how she takes care of the needs that people have now. She is very good at hospitality, and it's like, oh, you're thinking about what someone needs in a year, and she's offering them a drink and a snack and making them feel welcome now because this sense of reality. So I remember that from, I don't know, it has to be at least 10 years ago, in which you were starting to see those things about yourselves, but now you can see that in HD because there's a little clearer of a system that you understand how each of you are uniquely wired, and you can embrace that and honor each other in that, and see the maybe the lies you're believing, and also just grow and love each other better. My wife is a number 9, the peacemaker. And so that really helped our marriage to understand that, because whenever I had conflict, I'm like, Mary, why aren't you on my side? Like, it seems like you're always on the other person's side. And it's like, no, she is mature enough to understand that in every conflict, there's 2 sides, and she wants to understand that. And there's so much maturity and so much value in her being a peacemaker that I need, because I can get emotional, and I let emotions cloud conflict in some unhealthy ways sometimes, but she brings stability and clarity in understanding both sides of a conflict. And that's been so useful in us in marriage to deal with conflict in a way that speaks to each other's hearts, and in a way that's healthy, but also in her speaking into my life and me dealing with conflict with whoever it is. She can speak into a different area that I'm letting be clouded by my emotions, that I need her clarity from.
That's good. Yeah, if you can understand her superpower, or superpowers, it can help you to depend on her
Yes,
more,
absolutely.
to need her more, to rely on her. And that's a typical thing that can be healthy or not healthy for a type 9, is they have that superpower of being able to see all sides, to see so they're very non-judgmental. They're like, oh yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. And 9s can either use that as a way of mediating and creating real peace, or they can use it as a way of not taking sides when they need to take sides. When it comes to justice and things like that, 9s need to rock the boat more and not just see all sides, but to actually step up to the plate and fight for justice and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So we've covered several of them and just talking about ourselves and our spouses, but let's just start at the beginning with type 1 and give a little bit of context to all the 9 different types, what their strengths are, and maybe what some blind spots are that they need to watch out for.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure some of your listeners might not might be hearing about the Enneagram for the first time. And
absolutely,
so
there's probably some that have no idea what it is, and some of them have been told it's demonic, and
yeah,
so all kinds of mistruths to address today. But so I'd love to go through them all and see a little more context of what different types there are, and how that can be used for people's growth.
Yeah. I'll just give a 30-second overview of every type just to paint a picture. And if people are still wanting to know their type, I have actually a self-typing guide on my website. It has this information, and it's just built out more to help you see the typical behaviors and motivations of every type. And so your listeners can grab that on my website. It's gospelforenneagram.com. So it's gospel, FOR, Enneagram.com, and it's just a free
perfect
download.
And we'll link that when we post this episode
in the show notes. Great. Okay, for type 1s, they're the improvers, or sometimes called the perfectionists. They fear being bad or imperfect. They desire to be morally good. They focus on what needs improving, like how things can get better. So they avoid making mistakes. and they idolize, their idol is perfection or having to be right. So that's the type 1s. Type 2s, which you say you identify with most, are the helpers, or I like the befrienders. They typically are like, they make the best friends. They fear being rejected. They have a desire to be loved, wanted, and pursued. Their focus is on the needs of others, like you mentioned. They avoid their own needs. Oftentimes, if you ask a 2, what do you need? They're like, I don't know, because they're always focused on other needs. And they idolize being indispensable in people's lives. They want to be the Holy Spirit in people's lives. They want to be the helper in people's lives. And so the growth path for them is to slow down, to take care of yourself, to get hobbies and do better self-care, and knowing that the Holy Spirit is going to be able to be the rescuer in people's lives. You don't have to be the rescuer. For type 3s, the achievers performers, this is the one that I most identify with. There's a fear of failing, a desire for success and admiration, focus on their image and goals. They avoid failure and inefficiency and idolize success and accomplishment. For type 4s, the individualists are sometimes called the romantics. They fear being incomplete, inadequate, or less than. They desire to be unique and do meaningful things in life. They focus on what's missing in life. Like, what do we need to be complete? What do we need to be whole? Where are we missing beauty? They avoid trendy things. They don't like trends or what everyone else is doing. And they avoid ordinary or mundane roles or tasks. They idolize being unique or being different from everyone else. For type 5s, they're the investigators or observers. They fear being ignorant or invaded by others. They desire to be capable and competent. They focus on accumulating knowledge, lots of knowledge. They're researchers. They avoid looking uninformed and being intruded upon. They have really good boundaries, and they don't like it when people ignore their boundaries. And their idol is knowledge, of knowing it all. Type 6 for loyalists, or the loyal skeptics, sometimes they're called. They have a fear of being without support and guidance. They like the wolf pack. They like belonging to a group they're going to help protect, and that's going to protect them. Their desire is safety and protection. They focus on what could go wrong to protect themselves and their loved ones. They avoid uncertainty, and so are always asking questions to find certainty, because that brings security, a sense of security. And they idolize security. They might not send their kid on a mission trip to Africa or China or somewhere else because they value security above God's plan sometimes. For type 7s, they're called the enthusiasts. They fear being deprived of what they want or being trapped in pain. They desire to be happy and satisfied. They focus on what's next. They avoid pain and suffering, and they idolize pleasure or adventure. All right, these are the Peter Pans.
Very good.
And then you have type 8s. These are the MLKs, the challengers, the defenders. They fear looking weak or being controlled by others. They desire power, influence, and intensity in life, whereas type 9s, like your wife, values tranquility and peace. 8s desire intensity, action, movement, momentum. They focus on taking charge. Oftentimes they rise to the top of organizations because they don't like falling in line. They like taking charge. They avoid vulnerability or looking weak or innocent. They want to they want to have that armor on. They want to look tough, and they idolize control or power. And then lastly, for type 9s, they are the peacemakers or mediators. They fear being in conflict. They avoid conflict at all costs. They do not like being overlooked. They want to feel seen. They desire peace and tranquility. They really just desire an uninterrupted life. Just to have that
stability
peace and tranquility
is meaningful to them.
Stability, yeah. want to balance in the force,
Yes.
And so if they start feeling anger, or if you start feeling like they're getting attacked, or somebody's coming at them, they'll do whatever they can to sort of balance the force and keep anger at bay, because for them, anger equals separation. If you get into conflict, or if someone gets angry with them, they shut down, because they think, man, if we have an intense conversation, it's probably not going to go well. We're going to disconnect, and I might not ever be able to be reconnected with them again, right? So they do everything they can to sort of keep that force balanced. Their focus is on supporting others. They're very supportive. They avoid conflict and discomfort, and they idolize harmony.
Mm-hmm.
So they think, man, harmony is a great thing. But like I said before, idolizing harmony to a unhealthy extent can make you a peace faker rather than a peacemaker. Jesus did not idolize harmony. He embraced suffering. He went to the cross. He did things that did not feel good in order to fight for peace, the peace that we're going to experience in heaven. So nines need to watch out for that. So there you go. That was a very brief, quick overview.
Yes,
of
and I
all
hope
9
that people
types.
can take advantage of some of your resources and understand them more. One thing I really have appreciated about the Enneagram is, unlike what I felt with some other kind of personality type testing, is that it's not limiting you. It's not putting someone in a box and saying this is your limit, but it's actually helping me accomplish whatever God's called me to accomplish in a better, more efficient, in a healthier way, and eliminate some of the barriers that might help me accomplish that. So for me, feeling with being a type 2 and feeling unloved and like I don't belong with the other men because they're not loving me in a perfect way, that has been a barrier to me to really accomplishing God's mission at times, because I feel when I step into the mission, I feel rejected by the other people in the mission. So it's being able to see that clearly and having healthy expectations helps me step into those different roles, because I have the right expectations and I'm in a healthy place where I'm not asking something of the people around me that they're not able to give. Instead, I can receive that from the Lord and from the gospel and develop friendships that give me health. Therefore, I can step into the mission for what I have to give, not for and not be distracted by what I think I need from them, or come to a place of disillusionment and bitterness because they're not giving me what I need somewhere, even though I don't even know what that need is. And so it's really helped me step into different mission fields and different areas to serve and have a place of wholeness and realistic expectations of those people around me.
So you mentioned resentment, and I was just thinking, the Enneagram can be helpful in experiencing conviction and moving in God's direction without feeling condemnation. And as you know, it's just easy for the enemy to make us feel condemned, for our sin. Like, okay, why do I feel this resentment towards these people? I know I got to do something with it. I shouldn't feel this way. You can sort of beat yourself up for the resentment that you feel. But the Enneagram, again, provides a high definition picture of why you feel that resentment. And you can have empathy towards yourself, knowing that other twos are out there and they're going through the exact same struggle of dealing with resentment. Why? Well, because the reason is because twos are the most selfless type of people who see your needs and will make a checklist and will move towards you to fulfill those needs. Like if you're sick, they're going to be coming over. They're going to be making you casserole. They're going to be, doing different things for you. And you're also very attuned to people's needs. So if they are suffering, you feel that pain as well. And so you are drawn towards them to help them emotionally, to support them. They're, like I said, they're like the best friend. The problem is that all the other types aren't as attuned to other people's needs like you are, like a 2 understands or a 2 feels. And so they're not going to be as good as like, oh, you need a glass of water? Let me get you a glass of water. Like they're just not going to be as attuned to your needs as you are to them. And so, our mutual friend Chris Ruska always talks about putting chips in. It's like a poker game where twos are constantly putting chips in and putting debits in people's account of like, here, I'm helping you. Here's my generosity. Here's a gift. Constantly doing things for others. And what usually happens is your friends and the other people in your life are so far behind. If you're keeping track of all the things that you do for people, you're way up here and everyone else is way down here because you're so attuned to people's needs. And so what that gap creates is resentment.
Absolutely.
Like, I have done all these things for you. I showed up when you were sick. You didn't show up for me. Like, and you just look at that gap and twos will get the scroll out and be like, here's all the things,
I experienced that. It's been about 6 years ago when my house burned down. And so it was like this major crisis, obviously for my life. And I really felt unloved by a lot of people. It's like, oh, whenever you had a crisis, I was there with the casserole and what do you need? And I didn't feel that in return. There's a lot of people who were a blessing, but the Enneagram helped me get over that resentment, understanding that I had some unrealistic expectations of receiving from the people in ways that I had given. And so really helped me take that to the Lord and forgive of things that they didn't even need forgiven for because it was my own unrealistic expectations. So that's such a great deep analysis of number two.
Exactly.
And so I encourage our listeners to dig into the rest of the personality types, not only so that you can understand yourself, but you can understand the people around you, the people you're working with, especially in marriage, being able to understand your spouse more and the language they speak and what speaks to them and where their heart is an amazing tool for marriage. Tyler, I don't think I think we would be amiss to in this episode without talking about some of the controversy around Enneagram. And I think that when it comes to lies that we believe, there's a lot of them around the Enneagram, and especially with the accusation that it's demonic. And as I see Christians saying those things, there's two thoughts that came to my mind on why some of those rumors are spread. One is that Christians love the outrage of the day. And so, they love something to be outraged by. And on my podcast, I try to not buy into that. I was like, we're going to talk about issues with clarity and calmness and get to the bottom of it and not just express blind outrage, but sometimes Christians get caught up in just expressing outrage, and sometimes Christians love a good conspiracy theory, and I think that that's problematic for our witness and for the truth, and so we spread conspiracy theories because it gives us a sense of control and understanding and explanation for the world. And we have to be cautious with that because if we're spreading mistruths, then we are bearing a false witness and harming our witness as Christians. And so there's been some conspiracy theories about the Enneagram. And so I'd love for you to explain those and explain why they're not true and maybe where some people have been misled.
Yeah, I never set out to be a Enneagram apologist, but I found I want to do the work to get rid of some of those lies and some of those rumors because I think the Enneagram's so helpful that it's worth doing that work. And so I put a lot of research in, and I've done a live 6-week course on the Enneagram origins, and I'm coming out with like a self-paced course next month. So probably right around the time that many people will be listening to this. And so that's going to be available to help people to get clarity on the confusing origins and confidence to be able to use it as a Christian. But for me, I think it's worth doing this work because it's about cultural engagement, like good cultural engagement, which you do so well on this podcast. Because as you know, there's different types of Christians and different types of churches, and we're on a spectrum. So on one side, you have the fundamentalists, and on the other side, you have sort of the consumers who are just like consuming culture and have no filter. They aren't doing what the Apostle Paul said, to test everything, right? But then you have the fundamentalists on the other side that are have black and white categories, who can't think outside the box. Just like the Pharisees, they saw Jesus hanging around sinners, and so they're like, oh, well, obviously he's a drunk and a glutton. Like they just don't have categories for engaging with culture.
Yeah, making assumptions and accusations that aren't true.
Yeah. And so you have a bias against culture. If you think back to Solomon, Solomon was actually trained in Egypt, and he was, Egyptian. The Egyptian culture was had a lot of occult things, and it was a occultist culture, a lot of weird, shady stuff. But here you have, Solomon being trained in Egyptian wisdom, and then he's reappropriating it and putting it in a Christian or a Yahweh context for us to glean from. So, as we're engaging culture, we got to realize that God has given common grace. You have to have a theology of common grace, that God has spoken in the Word. It's authoritative. It's our standard of truth. But he continues to reveal his common grace and knowledge through science, through psychology, through different fields that we can benefit from and glean from. And the fundamentalists are going to be like, no, I don't trust anything. But a Christian who's a transformist can take those things that they receive in culture and transform culture with them by affirming cultural goods and products and knowledge and tools like the Enneagram. They can affirm things, but then also challenge things when necessary. They can put on their gospel lens and see things through a gospel lens, if that makes sense.
See things clearly and for what they are, and discern what is true and what isn't. And a tool like the Enneagram is observing truths about people, and so we can use those observations for, the collective good.
Yeah, and I would say psychology is an ongoing science of understanding human personality and behavior. And I feel like we should take that truth and use it for sniper sanctification, for these types of things we've been talking about. Okay, so I just wanted to say that this is a cultural engagement issue, and some of us have bias even before coming to the Enneagram, and so you're going to hear people who are boycotting the Enneagram, who are more on the fundamentalist end of things, because they typically boycott Halloween or boycott Harry Potter books or boycott other things, So you have to realize, do I have a bias before I even start thinking about the Enneagram? Because if I do have a bias, then as soon as I see a video on YouTube about the Enneagram or read an article or a podcast episode, trash talking the Enneagram, then you're going to grab a hold of that and you're going to promote that. And it's like, that's not good Christian thoughtful work. That's not how Christians don't have a knee-jerk reaction to things, but Christians think through things thoughtfully and go to multiple sources, and that's what I've tried to do. So some people think the Enneagram is ancient, but it's really a product of the 1960s by a guy named Oscar Achazo. And I'm not of the conviction that it's a Christian. After doing my research, I don't believe it's a Christian tool, but I believe that Oscar Achazo gleaned information from some of the Desert Fathers, like the vices and virtues, and glean some of that to put onto the Enneagram. But I don't think it's been handed down. There's no evidence that it's been handed down from generation to generation, just from my research. And so I don't think it's a Sufi tool. I don't think it's a Christian tool. I don't think it's an occultist tool. And therefore, I don't feel like I have to defend it as being a Christian tool. I feel like it was a psychological tool put together in the 1960s by Oscar Achazo, who overlaid personality insights onto this Enneagram symbol that had been around for a while, but it was never a personality tool for however long it existed. It was never a personality tool until Oscar Achazo got a hold of it in the 1960s and started laying personality insights over that 9-pointed symbol. Okay. And one of the rumors that Achazo received, is that Achazo received the Enneagram from an archangel Metatron. And so there was a Gospel Coalition article by Joe Carter that said that. And I just, did my homework, found out that he had quoted a National Catholic Reporter article from 2000, which then quoted that rumor from Richard Rohr book back in 1992, and then found that Richard Rohr had not cited that source. He'd put the Achazo quote in quotes, but had just heard it from somewhere. He had cited a lot of sources there, but did not cite that source. So that's just one example of somebody hearing something, putting it in a book, and then before you know it, other sources are citing other sources, and it all gets traced back to something that was never cited in the first place.
Yeah. So that's a good reminder is as Christians, we should seek the truth, and we should give, time for thoughtful research and consideration, and not just knee-jerk reactions with, kind of the outrage of the day. And so that's a really good reminder.
Yeah, and Jackie Hill Perry, came out and said the Enneagram is demonic, and she pointed to that National Catholic Reporter article.
Yeah, and I love Jackie Hill Perry, and so I was frustrated when I saw that. She has such great work on biblical perspectives on so many things, and especially obviously sexuality issues. I've referred people to her books, and so we love her as a sister in Christ. But sometimes people can be given wrong information, and then they run with that, and that has consequences when we share information that doesn't come from good sources.
She's phenomenal too. And actually, after she put that video out, I did a little response video, and me and another friend in the Enneagram space reached out to her, and she actually replied back with a really good reply saying that she was going to do some more research. And so
that's awesome.
That's phenomenal. Another rumor is that Naranjo, so the guy who learned the Enneagram from Achazo, his name was Claudio Naranjo. The rumor is that he received the Enneagram from automatic writing, which was interpreted as he received it from a spirit or spirits, and then people took it further and say, oh, well, he received it from a demon. Therefore, the Enneagram is demonic, and quote a bunch of Bible verses about dealing with the occult and psychics, and and then it just kind of goes from there. And the source of that was a June 2010 interview where Naranjo was talking about getting the Enneagram from automatic writing. So that was really, it was very confusing. Like, what in the world does he mean by automatic writing? And again, Christians don't understand automatic writing. They don't know what it means, and it just and so start making assumptions. And I was able to acquire 2 quotes from 2 of Naranjo's students that had studied under him in the 1990s, Beatrice Chestnut and Catherine Faber. And both of them are not Christians. So they don't have a bias either way as to what he meant, because they're not Christian. And both of them, again, 2 different sources working under Naranjo who knew him well, said that when he talked about automatic writing, there's 2 different definitions of automatic writing. There's a automatic writing where it's like a meditative writing process, where you don't just sit down and try hard to think intellectually to use your brain. It's more of like what Christians do when we are journaling and
contemplating.
We're opening ourselves up to letting things flow. Yeah, like you go on a retreat and you're sort of like opening yourself up more and quieting yourself to let things flow and let God make certain connections in your heart between different things. And Naranjo, that's what he was talking about when it came to automatic writing. Is he practiced meditation to let things flow more naturally. He did not mean that he was listening to a spirit or listening to a demon or trying to channel spirits. That's not what he was doing, and yet that's what everyone assumes. But Beatrice Chestnut and Catherine Faber had said, no, that's not what he was doing. He did not get the Enneagram out of thin air. He was a well-trained psychologist who studied at Berkeley, who studied at Harvard. He studied in cutting-edge programs in the U.S. on personality theory. And so he knew his stuff. He was well-educated. And so when he came up with the Enneatypes, he was drawing from his research from an education from Echazo of learning the work that he had done with personality insights. And then he was connecting his insights with his education, with Sigmund Freud, with Carl Jung, with Karen Horney, and a number of other influential Christian philosopher, Paul Tillich. He quotes all these people in his books. And so he's making all these connections, and he's to enhance and develop these psychological profiles that we know as the Enneagram. So all of this was, there's no evidence at all that he sort of received the Enneagram from, like Moses receiving the 10 Commandments on a mountain, or Joseph Smith receiving, a revelation from an angel. There's just no evidence that it came out of thin air. So hopefully that helps some of your listeners. I could go into more detail, but that's some of the
I think that's a great place to start. So I'd love to end the day with what are some next steps for some people? What resources are available? You do have your devotionals for 9 of them for each personality type that are available on Amazon. So those are great. What other resources are out there for people to dig into this a little bit and maybe take the next step?
Yeah, the biggest resources I'd point people to are the devotionals that I'm creating. There are 40-day devotionals for every single type. And so in the introduction, I go through the lies that you believe, the most common lies, and apply the gospel to those lies. And then I take a lot of the common themes for each type and just pair them up with scriptures and stories from the Bible to help, again, educate people on the probabilities that they might struggle with, but also just lots of encouragement and lots of gospel affirmation. And so I really wanted these devotionals to be books that help people feel seen and to hear God very, very clearly. There's a lot of different devotionals out there and a lot of different books. There's millions of books on Amazon, but I've written a book specifically for you. I want every word to jump off the page as you read it. And so I've written 6 of the books for 6 of the types so far. I'm working on the 7th, and then I'll finish the next 2 by the end of 2023 and finish up the series. So yeah, you can get those on Amazon or just go to my website, gospelforenneagram.com.
Yep, and you're on Instagram as Gospel for Enneagram, I think is your handle on there.
That's where the party's at. Yeah, that's where the most engagement is. Also on Facebook, Gospel for Enneagram, and then on YouTube, Gospel for Enneagram. I have hours of content on there that you can just go and binge watch, learning about all 9 types, how the types play out in work, in relationships, and love. So go binge watch. You'll enjoy it.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you for all the work you're doing. I admire you, appreciate the work you're doing, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of The Great Exchange. We pray that as you go throughout your week, you can examine some of the lies that you believe and exchange them for God's truth. And in doing so, you'll experience more and more freedom to be the person that He made you to be. Thank you for joining us. Check out thegreatexchangepodcast.com, calibrateministries.com, and we will see you next week.